Okay, we're ready to begin. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Dickens. I'm the Michigan Department of Education's Grow Your Own consultant. Bill?
Hi, everybody. I'm Phil Chase. I work on the Grow Your Own grant as well as the student loan repayment program.
Great. We're here to do a few things. We've got a video today that is going to overview the grant very briefly, but also is going to talk about the grantee responsibilities, some reminders about some requirements of this grant. We're also going to look into the sunset of this grant as we round the corner for our last year of the performance period of the 27B Grow Your Own Staff Grant. We're going to offer you some clarification and reminders, and we're going to preview an opportunity for office hours with the MDE staff. So you all have been grantees for a while now, and some of you have been grantees since round one back in, 2023, but we have included this slide since it's always helpful to have a review and because you might want to show this section to administrators or staff members who might be new to your district. Keep in mind that eligible candidates, when we talk about eligible candidates here, that they can be any employee who works in the school and that this includes third-party employees as well. I know this has been a misconception for some folks. We want to make sure that you are keeping in mind all the potential candidates you have in your pool. Again, this is a federally funded grant through the U.S. Treasury, and it is an award to the districts and to fill district needs. So it's going to pay for initial teacher certification, additional endorsements on an existing certificate, and it involves close partnership with educator preparation providers who you can add and subtract, and we'll come back to that in a little bit as well. The grant's going to pay for many things. It's designed to be very flexible. This grant is ultimately designed to pay for a no-cost pathway, and no cost, as defined as a pathway that contemplates all the potential costs for a candidate and plans for the final cost of the candidate to be $0 at least during that grant's performance period. So some of the costs that are allowable might not be on this list. Again, these costs need to be necessary for a pathway to certification. And you can always ask our team to double check if a cost might be allowable. And we encourage you to do so. So one of the misconceptions we'll adjust later are some examples of what is and isn't an allowable cost under the GYO grant, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. I do want to emphasize, though, for round three priority districts, that the additional funds that they received are only designed to support staff who are working in schools indexed for support. So those are ATS, TSI, and CSI. And only those certification pathways are eligible to receive funding through that last round of awards that's designated for those schools indexed for support. So something to keep in mind. So one of the concerns that we have is that, and that many people share, is that given the limited amount of time left on the grant, grantees might still have a bit of a tenuous grasp of their responsibilities of the grant or under the grant between now and September of 2026, which is going to be the obligation deadline for this grant. And even if they do have a pretty solid grasp, grantees might need help planning on what to do between now and the end of that obligation period. So we're wanting to remind you of what those responsibilities are, especially in the face of some administrative turnover that you might be seeing. And we want to make sure that you are developing and following your own policies, local policies and procedures, and documenting these as well. We want to make sure that all your EPP agreements are in place. We want to make sure that you're covering all your reporting requirements to both our team and our federal compliance team, known as Guidehouse. And we want to make sure that you're preparing early for that obligation period and in September of next year. Now, a very helpful resource that all grantees should be very familiar with by now is the monitoring and guidance document for this grant. You can find that on the Grow Your Own School Staff website, which is another excellent resource. And that's going to have, it's basically a compendium of all of the requirements of the grant. It includes the timelines, the reporting responsibilities, flexibilities, and it's very essential information for anybody administering this grant. We encourage you to refer to it often, download it if you can't find it, and share it with whoever you need to share it with. So what appears in the red box is what's coming up soon. So this is all from the monitoring and guidance document reporting calendar. And what appears in the red box is what's coming up soon. And what you see highlighted in yellow on the right side of the screen there is a critical date that we're looking ahead to. I want to note that whenever a date must change, the primary contact will receive an email update from the GYO team before that date. For example, the September 2025 PIC report deadline is going to be extended by a couple weeks to accommodate the challenges that districts are facing with the delayed state budget. So anytime we need to make a change, or anytime there's, for example, technical difficulty with Nexus or something else comes up, please keep an eye on your email. We want to be flexible, we want to accommodate you, but we also need to make sure that you are getting timely emails as well. So if you have an updated contact, this won't be the last time I say it, but please make sure that you let us know if you need to update those contacts. So I mentioned this earlier, but the 27B Grow Your Own Staff Grant website is the best source for updated information and instructions, documents, etc. It's got some really helpful resources too. It's got the grant administration timeline. There's a list of FAQs that we maintain, and there's some resources like guides for best practices for GYO implementation. We recommend strongly that you keep it bookmarked. There's a QR code there for your convenience. All right, and now I'm going to pass it on to Phil.
You got it. Okay. So one of the things that Jenny and I and the team wanted to do and make this video is to give you a view into the sunset. That means what's coming up between now and the end of the grant period, or at least the end of the obligation period. So just to remind everybody, give our focus here is almost exactly a year, a little bit less than a year remains until the last point at which a grantee can post expenditures. That means that we are going to be focusing on reviewing the progress of all candidates, making plans for their success, even if that means there is life after 27B, right? And yes, there is life after 27B, as we're apt to say. But our shared focus has got to be on helping every district and every individual candidate as well meet the original goals for staffing under the grant to the maximum extent possible. So you'll see the next few slides, we're really looking at focusing on that. But that's our vision into the sunset, if you will. So one of the things I think would be the first and foremost on our brains about looking the sunset is we really need to ask ourselves and ask you, are you on top of the candidate finish lines and as well as candidates who might have had late starts? Those candidates are going to have some special needs if they're late starts, but also keep in mind that one of the things that we've done from some of our reporting that we've done, as well as some of our TA in the past, is where are your candidates? Are they progressing as they should? If not, how do you remove barriers? What are the obstacles? What do they need? So a couple of questions I think are orienting questions for any grantee looking at this TA would be, first of all, do you have an idea? Do you have a good idea which candidates are due to complete their pathways to initial certification or initial endorsement? Remember, that's the main idea of the grant between now and September 2026. Those people are on target. You're happy about that, and the idea is as soon as they get that additional endorsement or initial certification, then you'll put them in a job, put them in the classroom, and boy, you have done what the grant wanted you to do. Plus, you've solved a staffing issue at your own school. That's the whole point. But there's other candidates we also have to be mindful of. Which candidates are unlikely to complete their pathways by that time, and what obstacles stand in their way? Sometimes the obstacles they're challenging. Sometimes I didn't know that we could move them to a different EVP, or there's something we can even help you come out with. As you're going to see later in the video, do not hesitate to contact us. We can come up with creative ideas. Let's think creatively. Let's remove those obstacles for those candidates because we definitely want them to finish. Remember, we want to take all the grant money and put it in the hands of the candidates. We don't want anything coming back to us. We want to make sure that the goals of the grant are met to the extent possible. And then another orienting question we have is which candidates are committed to completing their pathways but won't do so on time. Remember, there's going to be life after set 27B. We have a couple of suggestions for you, but what you should be thinking about now is what supports the district have in mind for them, because after all, they made a commitment to you and you're making a commitment to them. So let's talk about some ways that we can have some more mindfulness for those candidates. So on your radar screen, we put a couple of things that we want to keep on your radar screen or keep in your forefront as we go into the sunset, if you will. First of all, that close of expenditures date is going to come up. We have a final expenditure report that's due next fall, and it means that you can't make all reimbursement requests, the money that you were reimbursed to be able to transferred to yourself on behalf of a candidate or to the candidate himself or herself must be made by November 29, 2026. That's right. That's not a whole lot of time. And we have that because we have to submit reports to the federal government. So that is actually clearly spelled out in your reporting calendar that Jenny presented a few slides ago. So another thing that we want to keep on the radar screen is just different strategies to spend down those funds. Sometimes we get questions about, can I do this and can I do that? And we're like, yes, please do this thing and please try this thing. So in general, definitely keep us in mind if you've got a question. You saw earlier slides about what's an allowable cost, but we've had a few, like, some suggestions that came in from other districts. So for example, here's a good one. Like there's no prepayment allowed, but you can have a similar result if the EPP that you have an agreement with accommodates billing for what's called continuous service. That means like the EPP is willing to bill the district for entire years or even a program's worth of tuition prior to the obligation deadline. Some EPPs are doing this. We're getting questions from EPP. Is this allowed? Yes, it is. Remember, you have an agreement with your EPP that you created that can be updated, right? And so you can go ahead and do something like billing for continuous service if it means extending that platform a little longer after that November 29 date. So that's a thing that we get a lot of questions about. In fact, I confess one of the reasons we made this video is to just make that point because some people have had so many questions, but we're glad we told you right now. Some other strategies here is, reduce the number of expenditures paid directly to the candidate. There is a time delay we know about when the candidate fronts a cost and then you give money to the candidate. Is there anything wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that. But some some district grantees have said, it's actually just faster if we pay on behalf of something, for example, books, a computer, whatever's allowable cost. We just pay it and then we reimburse ourselves. The finance team in our school districts has a much easier time with that. And we go, good idea, because again, time will be of the essence very soon as we look into the sunset. So another strategy we can share is just to purchase as many supportive or supporting expenses as possible. So we had a question come in about, is it okay to buy a computer with GYO funds? And the answer is yes, as long as you retain ownership over that computer because it was something that was bought with grant funds. You can't pass it along to the candidate. But now that you bought the computer, buy the software and help that person be successful with their coursework, nothing wrong with that. But do that now, put that in place so you're spending down that funds and that person is ready for their final semesters or even life after 27B. So I put on the screen a couple of ideas for strategies to spend funds. It's interesting because Jenny and I sometimes get questions and we know that we put out guidance about allowable costs, but still people go, really? Because what about this? Really? Because what about that? Again, if you have any question at all about what's an allowable fund, email us right away. There's no time to waste. So another thing on our radar screen is I've been saying this phrase, life after 27B. What is that going to look like, right? So one of the things I asked you to think about in an earlier slide was, do you have a handle on what that candidate needs to the end of their pathway and then even beyond? So how long will each candidate realistically need after the closed expenditure period? You should be able to know your candidates enough to be able to answer that question. There are some people we get some questions from districts that just say, hey, this person just needs to do MTTC tests. We didn't think they'd be part of 27B. We're like, why not? Right? Like you could do that, right? I mean, or this person, we didn't want to start this person because they only had one class left. Let them do the one class. Then they do it for free. Then they become a teacher, right? So if you have an idea of realistically when those people are going to, how much time they need, then you can kind of plan out like a tiered structure of support for them, if you will. We sometimes call, by the way, life after 27B a patchwork quilt of support that may not be 27B. At this point, we've got a lot of questions about, is 27B going to be like continued or whatever? Right now, as the videotaping, of course, it's our fervent hope, but we can't promise that. Right now, what we know is the end of the grant is coming up and we've got a plan for that, right? But my friends, there are other non-27B support out there. It's interesting, I have to tell you, because sometimes I get a question, they're like, I heard about this thing. Can I have that for my teachers? I thought you said that it was non-concurrent. And the cool thing is, after 27B ends, after that candidate's receiving the 27B support, they can go ahead and you can go look into the Michigan Future Educator Stipend and Michigan Educator Fellowship. Remember, you just couldn't draw on that at the same time. But if the 27B is ending, now you might look into extending that might be a great extension. Especially, and we had this question again from a grantee, especially because the grantee was planning that the end of the pathway would, of course, end in student teaching, but they were like, but the student teaching can't happen until spring 2026. And we went, no problem. They went, what do you mean, no problem? We say, hey, think about the fellowship, because the fellowship can underscore, the stipend can support them while they're doing their student teaching semester. So, you know, we got to.
Phil, that would be spring 2027, I think, is what they were
I'm sorry,
referring to.
my fault. 2027. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the last semester after the grant. Yeah. So remember, there is still some support out there, and we don't see that going away. Another thing that I personally recommended, because it's kind of a personal story, is when I was a teacher in the Godfrey District, which is over by Grand Rapids, we had this really great, like the school board brokered this wonderful deal to get 50% off reimbursement for Aquinas College. Boy, I tell you, I took advantage of that because I needed my ESL endorsement at the time. And then I decided to get my second master's, because why not? 50% off coupon to a Dutch guy like me. That means that's a big bonus, right? So we're also recommending that one of the patchwork of support could be your school district can reach out to the EPPs where the candidates are currently studying and see if they can get a tuition reduction. EPPs love that thing, because what EPP wants to say goodbye to a candidate who's doing so well and only has a little bit of time left? They might be incentivized to give you a discount. We can't promise it, but is it worth a shot? It is worth a shot, right? Michigan Reconnect's another thing. And Jenny, can you talk a little bit about Michigan Reconnect?
Yeah, Michigan Reconnect is one of the supportive grant-ish opportunities that MDE has available for folks who are, I think, over the age of 25 and want to return to school. So this is, again, a candidate by candidate situation, but it's one example of the funding opportunities that is out there through MDE, not through our office, but through somebody else's office. There's a lot out there that we encourage you to check out.
Yeah, there is. In fact, we got a educator workforce grants page that has updated and current opportunities. As we hear of stuff, we're going to put that up there. So I tell you what, was something I used to say as a teacher, by hook or by crook, right? So let's do it for the candidates. Let's make sure they have that life after 27B and did not fall off a cliff. And remember, of course, that, like I said in a couple slides ago, this is an agreement you made with your candidate. They're making a commitment, you're making a commitment, right? So remember, you're pledged to hire candidates, because that's something that we hold sacred. And again, your candidates are getting ready to address real staffing needs at your district. So recognize that and keep supporting them. This next part of the presentation is kind of my favorite two slides because I do get a lot of comments that I look like the guy from Mythbusters. But we wanted to put this in because, as Jenny and I have collected questions and we've talked to grantees and we keep our ear to the ground, we recognize that some grantees may have misconceptions, or they may not understand exactly the flexibilities or the creativities that actually were in the grant. And that's okay, because what they're doing is they're trying to follow the rules, and we want them to follow the rules. Jenny showed you a few slides. We showed you a few slides ago the monitoring and guidance document. We want you to follow that, right? But along the way, we've gathered a few things that we want to tell you, that there's some myths out there that we want to bust, right? So this grant is
also the good news slides, I would say.
Yeah, there's some good news. Yeah. This is all good news. So yeah. But the grant is designed to flex with your needs. And again, since there's only a year left, be careful about making too many changes now. But again, just have a plan, right? So these things might be part of your plan that they weren't before, because you might have been laboring under bad or under incorrect information. So remember, none of these is true, right? We've had somebody say, and I've had somebody say this to me, I didn't want to start the person, right? Because they weren't going to get an endorsement that we originally put in our application. I was like, no, you can, because they said, oh my goodness, because in the meantime, between the time of the application and now, we had this open up, but I didn't think I was able to give them this. I able to have them be a candidate. We said, absolutely. Your staffing needs, though, it's interesting because I remind this person at the time we had the application, we actually knew that your staffing needs were a cut in time. That was what you were dealing with at that time. But we know that staffing needs can morph over time. So the grant can allow you to reallocate the funds for candidates, or that you can start candidates who you may not have envisioned, but will fill those staffing needs. Yes, just because it's on your original application doesn't mean you have to stick to it. That was the basis by which we awarded you the funds, but we understand, hey, things can change. So if you've got new classrooms opening up because you've had you've had some staff transitions, that right there is number one. That was the first myth we wanted to bust, right? Another one is it's too late for candidates to start. No, it's not. One of the things that I've caught Jenny and I saying on the phone or in emails is, whatever you can do for the candidates, do it, right? Even if they say, well, I didn't want to start because we only have a year left, so they won't finish the pathway. But wouldn't they like to start the pathway and then maybe they get momentum, and then after 27B, there's some combination. Think of the patchwork quilt we talked to you about. Think about their own support. Maybe districts give them raw financial support. There might be something you can do to still make them successful to get that initial certification or additional endorsement, but don't not give them something. If you've got the money, put that in the hands of the teachers, put that in your hands as reimbursement. Don't give it back to us. We don't want it. So another one that kind of went along with that is somebody had asked, well, it's too late for the candidates to start at a different EPP, right? So they had some time in the grant, and then they said, well, because we didn't write an EPP agreement by this time, you can't transfer EP. Oh, you sure can. In fact, appendices A and C, that's right, A and C are my two favorite appendices in the monitoring guidance document, because A talks about how to add on an EPP, yep, in the middle of the grant, and C talks about how to reallocate funds to different candidates if somebody drops out or you might have a change. So it is not too late for candidates to start at a different EPP, especially if that candidate's going to be successful. Do we care if they finished up the last year at a different college, university? No, we don't. The whole point is to get them to the finish line. Another one this was an interesting one that came in from an email, that they thought, well, I can't give too much money to one candidate. And I said, why? Because they're going to be jealous? I mean, right? So there's no cap of support for individual candidates. If a candidate needs $50,000 of the money that was granted to get to their finish line, and another candidate needs only $10,000 to get to the finish line, who cares? They're both getting to the finish line. That's the whole point, right? So then we've looked back at some other emails. We found some more myths. So first of all, replace your candidates is one of the things we wanted to get to you, because once a candidate drops out, this is another email we had. The people said, do I just send the money back? No, you could use that. That's what Appendix C is talking about. Replace your candidates if they drop out or they go do something else, because that happens sometimes. Staff transition is going to happen. That's a reality of life. But once they drop out, say, who else would like to be a candidate? Do that work to see if there's anybody else among your staff. There might be somebody who goes, hey, if you can pay for 2 of my semesters, I'll do a thing. I'll be a math teacher or something. Like, you never know. So no, the money does not automatically put set aside. It still is in your pool of money to allocate, right? Another myth that we sometimes encounter is that we shouldn't, like, if it's only one small part of the pathway, and I mentioned this a little while ago, it's only one small part of the pathway, so they really wouldn't be GYO candidates. Why not? Support them in as much as you can. Absolutely. Another one we got, this is a couple months ago. How do I access my application? I need to change it. Don't worry about that. You don't need to change your application. We trust you. In fact, you'll see in a minute where I'm going to say, but you got to document your decisions. We trust you to make those changes and to put policies in place. Because remember, it's your grant. We granted you the money to run your own GYO program. All you have to do is just document your decision. So we understood, again, that we gave you some grant money based on what were his assumptions and what your plans were at the time. They can change. You don't need to update your application.
Bill, I'm
And
going
then
to jump
another
in
one.
real
Yeah,
quick
go
if
ahead.
I can.
Sure.
On the note of reflection and retrospection, um, another myth that we sometimes come across is folks who don't realize that this is retrospective to March 3rd, 2021. So you
Oh,
might have
good.
some candidates who already finished and became teachers in your district even before you knew about this grant.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it was in, if these costs were designed to fill a shortage in your district, you can reimburse those yourself or the candidate for those costs. Again, just make sure that you note it. And on top of that, if the candidate's already done with the program, you don't need to create a new EPP agreement because, again, this is retrospective. You can't go back in time.
Right.
But do keep in mind that there might have been some costs that arose for your GYO program before you were even awarded that you can include in this grant.
That's a good one. That's a real good one. And this last bullet point, I think I already tackled. If it, you know, don't if you don't feel the candidate can finish the pathway, you can still again do as much as you can for the candidate. Let them have something. Something's better than nothing, my friends. So we're hoping that that the combination of like the review of the grant plus looking at the sunset plus some of these myth busting is really going to help orient you to success for this last part of the grant. But of course, we're not going to go away. We're here. We're planning targeted support for our lovely grantees. First of all, we're going to email the primary contact at every grantee the registration links for this thing we're calling again office hours. We love office hours because we love meeting grantees, we love talking to them, we love all the questions, right? But we're going to have a set of office hours coming up in November where you can register for them and you can ask any question you want. And then we can also help you work out obstacles you might be feeling because this video might have had you go, oh, the old V8 commercial. I could have had a V8. I thought of a question, and then this is a good way to do it. Come to our office hours. So look for the registration links for office hours coming in like mid to late October. We're still working on the plan. We're going to also look at the GYO performance report. A lot of you had given some really great responses about your policies and procedures. So we're going to kind of look at that and maybe follow up with some of you. We're also going to do some meetings with individual grantees about where we're seeing some underspending and maybe the progress of your spending, because that we might be able to sort of come in as your friends, your critical friends and advisors, if you will, about how to get the money out the door and into the hands of your candidates. So I'm going to end with the obligatory email us if you've got any questions, right? mde-edworkforcegrants@michigan.gov. But this is not the time for just emailing and then being like, okay, good luck. We're going to be giving you personal contact and continued support. So if you feel you need to meet with the team, we're gonna be clearing some of our time off for the office hours, but we'll also clear off time if you have some very specific things. So we're happy to meet. Reach out to us if you're seeing this video now and you're like, I gotta meet them and we gotta talk through something thorny. We're here for you. Otherwise, definitely email us if ever you have a question. Don't hesitate to reach out to us.
I also want to throw in one last plug. In April, we're hoping to have a summit, a statewide summit of GYO programs where you can all come together and talk about promising practices too. So keep that in mind. This is the year for talking. This is the year for communication and working together to make sure that we have a successful end to this grant, but launch into life after 27B.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we are looking forward to a successful end, as Jenny said, and we're here to help you whenever you want. See you later.
Bye bye.
Cool.